that agent is going to make their money off of the book deal. That's why the agent is representing them. That's why they want to do it. And the publisher is publishing the book because they see the opportunity. They see the marketability of it.
Desireé, what should an author do when they type the words "the end"?
They should put the book away for a while, set the manuscript aside, go back and read it maybe 2 weeks, a month, even 3 months later. And then they're going to have those fresh eyes that they need to see it anew and see maybe some of the flaws, some of the things that need to be fixed. And then they should call up a developmental editor and have them go through it. And then they might want to pull in a few beta readers to help them further flesh things out. And then a line editor and a copy editor. And at the end, depending upon if they're going to self-publish that book or if they're going to go with a publisher, they might be bringing in still a final proofer to really make sure the manuscript is actually at the end.
Okay, so this is not a light thing like where you can rush. Like it needs time to breathe. It needs several sets of eyes.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of authors make, especially new authors. We have this idea, this perception, and maybe we've heard it in the past or we've just imagined it. You know, the author is this person that goes off into this cabin in the woods and they write their opus. And it seems like a very solitary experience. But in actuality, again, depending upon whether they're self-published with a small press or with even one of the big 4 or 5 publishers, they need a team behind them, especially nowadays in order to be competitive. So if they are going the traditional publishing route, there's a good chance that that publisher is going to bring in a certain amount of editors to help them. But even getting to that stage, oftentimes, they need to get the manuscript in as tip-top of shape as possible because there's a lot of competition out there in the publishing world. And those acquisition editors see a lot of manuscripts come across their desk. So if a manuscript is further along, it's going to set them apart. And if that author is self-publishing or going with a smaller press that might not have that staff, then they definitely are going to want to make sure that it goes through all those stages of editing before it's complete.
Okay, so we're looking at even once the end is typed, maybe even a year or so before it's actually out in the sort of the public sphere.
Yeah, it varies. The path to publishing, if you're going the traditional route, that's going to be at least 18 months, if not longer, because at that point, what you're going to be doing is looking for a literary agent. And that literary agent, usually it's about a year. I've seen it all the way up to 2 or 3 years. They're going to shop it around for you. They're going to contact publishers. They're going to try to find you that coveted book deal. And that takes time. Even if you get those 2 things to happen super fast, which it really doesn't usually happen that fast, the publishers themselves are often working on a schedule that's at least a year in advance. So 18 months is a very kind estimate. It can take 2 or 3 years. The publishing industry takes a very, very long time. But then you have those smaller indie presses. And there's also hybrid presses that are now in the mix. So they're a little bit more agile. They can move a little bit faster for the author. And a lot of times they rely on the author to bring some of their skills and a little bit more to the table than a traditional larger publisher might. And then there's also the path an author takes if they want to self-publish or create their own imprint. That's something that a lot of authors are doing today, and it works better with different genres. But for the sake of this question, yeah, you then have the ability to move super fast. But just because you can move super fast doesn't mean that you necessarily should. That's where you really still need all of those different forms of editors to come in and help out. But even in that case, you probably want to give yourself at least 6 months depending upon the genre, depending upon the manuscript, depending upon if it's relying on other books in a series, etc., in order to get the book out there.
Awesome. I'm wondering, what is a hybrid publisher? Can we explain?
Sure. So in the world of publishing, I say the big four, big five, there's a little bit of consolidation happening in the industry. So those are the big presses that have been around for many years, and they have many different imprints underneath them. And then you have the indie or the small presses that are kind of in the middle, and then you have the self-published author. So a new cottage industry that's popped up in recent years is this concept of the hybrid press. Essentially, they're going to help an author publish their book. They're going to be the publisher. But unlike traditional publishing deals or traditional book deals, they're paid an upfront fee for it. Usually in the publishing world, when that author gets that agent, like I described a little bit ago, they get the agent and they get the book deal, that agent is going to make their money off of the book deal. That's why the agent is representing them. That's why they want to do it. And the publisher is publishing the book because they see the opportunity. They see the marketability of it. They understand that if they put that, in their catalog, they're going to make so many sales. That's what they're looking at. So the hybrid presses that exist out there are doing a lot of the work that a publisher will do, but instead of making the money off the back end, they're making it off the front end. And there's some controversy on hybrid presses within the industry. I've worked with many and know of many who are very above board, very honest, wonderful to work with. They really care about the authors, and they're doing it because, quite frankly, a lot of authors can't do all of that themselves. This whole idea of being a self-published author and then you're doing all of the things that a publisher can do is daunting. I don't know many authors who really can pull that off well. It's the expectation that somebody can be a unicorn and can do the marketing and the editing and the book cover design and the layout and the metadata, the keywords, all of that. Not to mention they're probably going to be asked to have a website, social media presence, all of those things, the marketing of the book, as well as actually getting it, the distribution out there, is a lot for an author who is a self-published author to do. And then on the other end of the spectrum, with the hybrid presses, you have a lot of unsavory sorts out there, unfortunately. They're giving a bad name to the industry because they're there to make money, to get paid up front. A lot of times they deliver subpar services to the authors. They're not necessarily getting the distribution that they should. I've seen some hybrid presses that are really restrictive with the cover art even, which to me, if you're gonna be self-published or with a hybrid press, that's one of the things that an author should probably have a little bit more say over. That control, that whole idea of control is the spectrum that an author is living on nowadays, all the way from self-published to traditional publishing. And with that hybrid press somewhere in the middle, as long as they're doing the right thing for the author, listening to the author, and doing their best to get the distribution, then I think those hybrid presses have a place in the industry.
And forgive me, is that considered a vanity press?
Back in the day, that's exactly what they called them. And there's a lot of folks out there who will say it's just vanity presses with a new name. There's a few nuances, a few differences, though, with what we might consider a vanity press. So one of the things with vanity presses is, and we can thank Amazon a lot for what they did and, just creating this equal playing field for authors. But with vanity presses, a lot of times you were buying, hundreds, even thousands of books. Authors were storing them in their basements or their garages, and they really didn't have the distribution in place to actually sell those books. And that title of being with a vanity press, it was like just a scarlet letter that an author would wear. Many years ago, I worked at a radio station in Los Angeles, and it was during the LA Times Festival of Books, which is a big event in LA, and Howard Rosenberg, who at the time was the TV critic for the LA Times, he came in the studio to do an interview and to talk about his book that was coming out. And I remember him telling me that self-published authors, anybody with a vanity press, in other words, don't do that. So at this point in time, that was easily probably about 20 years ago. But a lot has happened since then. A lot that benefits the authors. When Amazon came along and basically made it so that anybody can publish a book, it really changed the dynamic of the industry. And that's where you see so many self-published authors that were actually making money. And that scarlet letter, was no longer a thing within the industry. Heck, it only took a few years. It was probably around 2008, 2010, when a lot of self-published authors were doing better than their traditionally published counterparts. Now, I mentioned genre before. Genre matters. I do see a lot of authors who feel that, oh, I've heard self-publishing is a thing and you can make a lot of money doing it. Gee, I'm just going to do that. But maybe their genre or the style of their book doesn't lend itself to that. Genres like romance, genre fiction, a lot of times do very, very well in that space. And a big part of the reason is romance readers, they're ravenous. They'll read 2, 3, 4 novels in a week. Whereas somebody who's, reading hard science fiction and the book is 3 times as long as one romance novel, it's a slower read. So you just don't have that fan dedication. The other thing that romance authors have going for them is their mad networking skills. If you want to write romance, I recommend going out and finding your community because it's there. Because of the fact that their fan bases will read books so fast, a lot of those romance writers will work together. They'll share their marketing and their email lists. They'll cross-promote each other. They'll collaborate on projects. They'll go into anthologies together. So there's a lot of collaborative activity happening with romance writers because of that fact. And then again, if somebody has written literary fiction or something along those lines, then self-publishing may not necessarily be the best path for them. But it really just depends upon the writer, upon their goals. And going back to what we talked about before, how much time they're willing to wait in order to see their book on the shelf.